I just wanted to see Katherine Mangu-Ward's head snap back
Worked.
to attention. We are coming at you live from Reason's DC headquarters. This is the People's Libertarian House here that we're broadcasting this post-State of the Union roundtable, where we're going to dissect the carnival of Lenny Skutniks that we all just witnessed over the last hour and change over here. You can send us your questions. Don't look at me like that. I can see you out of the corner of my eyes,
just
Catherine.
looking at you. It's just
Here.
my face.
It's her resting purple hair face. I am Matt Welch, editor-at-large of Reason. This is Katherine Mangu-Ward, editor of everything, apparently, at Reason. And this is Peter Suderman, who's going to have to get back from the mic because I think he's had enough of brown beverage now to be...
It's apple juice.
Extremely loud here. Again, go to the comment section in Facebook and ask us various questions. Just to kick things off here, Katherine... you're in charge of Libertarians now.
Yes.
What's a general overall feel of the Americans Are Dreamers 2 speech?
Americans Are Dreamers 2 was the worst best line in that speech, for sure. I think overall it was very similar to his first, not State of the Union, right around the inauguration, which was to say there was a surprisingly large number of good bits and the bad bits were soft-pedaled and didn't sound as bad as the bad bits will actually be.
That's a lot of bits to sort through there. I'm still wrapping my brain around it. Suderman, what stuck out to you?
The speech. Man, what stuck
That's
out?
how this is gonna go.
Yes.
So close to the word bits.
Some bits stuck out. It's true.
Okay.
The Trump speech tonight was, I think, kind of a triumph of not Trumpism, right? This was like the least Trumpy Trump speech you can imagine. Now, I mean, I don't mean that there is no Trump aspect to it. Obviously, the immigration reform passage is the central passage. It's like the second act kicker, right? It comes about 3/4 of the way through the speech. It's the biggest section. It's the focus of the speech. It's all kind of leading up to and then away from the immigration bit. And that's what he was really there to sell, was his immigration reform, which I don't think any of us are in favor of in a lot of ways, though perhaps it could have been worse. What stuck out to me was how kind of conventionally Republican this was in a lot of ways, and how not sort of notably awful and Trumpian it was. Like, if this had been a speech delivered by Jeb Bush or by Marco Rubio, it would have been probably a little more friendly on immigration, probably a little more pushy when it comes to spending more on the military, although Trump did definitely hit that note and wants to both beef up our nuclear arsenal and spend a shit ton more on the military. But we wouldn't have been like, oh my goodness, this is just way outside of anything we've ever seen before.
I think part of the untrumpifying the Trump kind of angle there, that was what the Lenny Skutnik, which is the stand-in characters that Ronald Reagan was an actual guy, an actual hero named Lenny Skutnik that he introduced in, I believe, the 1982 State of the Union address. But I mean, Donald Trump introduced 15 people at least, stand up and do this. It's very easy for cynical libertarians, not cynical libertarians alike, and just humans to glaze over there. Although a dude at the end waving the crutches.
That was pretty solid.
Look.
Other than North Korean dude, which was clearly the best audience call out, can we pick our favorite?
Yeah. Favorite Skutnik.
Can we pick our favorite? So I liked the lady with the baby. Obviously, Rebecca Holtzer or whatever her name was. And the reason I liked her appearance was because she had her nursing cover on when they cut to her. And I was hoping to God that she was in the middle of actually feeding her baby during the State of the Union. And we were going to be completely derailed from the immigration debate by a big, crazy national debate about breastfeeding in public.
Can we have that debate right now? Just for a minute? I think do the minute-long version of it. What would you say?
It is good. It should be allowed.
Especially in Congress, where you can't even open up a computer without being arrested. But no, get back to the kind of the point of having all these people to wrap the story of America as the report of America. That's what they're constitutionally bound to do. The executive is supposed to deliver a report to Congress about what America is doing out there. His report is, look at all of these people, everyday normal heroism and greatness of Americans. He is wrapping all of us and himself in the glow of that kind of sense of normalcy, which I think stands at a contrast to one of the selling propositions of Donald Trump, at least among a lot of his fans, is that he's abnormal. He's not the guy. He's so strange. He's set so far apart from these institutions in Washington. We want him to go there and be the weird guy who maybe will invite all of Bill Clinton's, accusing women to be at a debate, which he actually did. I don't know if we all remember him doing that.
I feel like that's his fourth State of the Union. That's when those gals get the State of the Union invite.
Do you think we have to wait that long? I mean, I feel like it's the Red Wedding. It's season 3.
Am I too? Maybe I'm in the wrong here. As you say, this was like a pretty normal State of the Union. It was fine. There were some bits. New thing is clearly the FDA part of big Trump speeches is the best part. Right?
That was true in the first State of the Union, though, too.
True in the first one.
The
and
not
then
State of the
tonight
Union.
we had, whatever. Tonight we had right to try, which is not something that you hear the kind of random Republican on the street necessarily make a big deal about, much more the kind of, Liberty Freedom Caucus heads who are into that stuff. And he gave a nice little chunk to that. Now,
it was the one place where he felt like a Republican of the future rather than sort of like a crass parody of a Republican from the past.
Right. That's right. And also, I do think there's definitely a piece of this, which is that he's, you have to have a little nitty gritty policy part in the middle. And this is what he chose for that. So it's pretty good.
We have some questions here. I want to go to some of them. We kind of just, we're taking a break. We're having issues. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, and welcome to the Reason Post State of the Union Facebook Live portion of our live thing. We're having some technical difficulties there. I am Matt Welch, editor-at-large. This is Katherine Mangu-Ward, editor of everything, and Peter Suderman, managing editor of Reason.com. And we have been talking about, in Peter's words, and I think he's lying, the sort of shocking normalcy, in a sense, of the Trump address here. And we were talking just before we took a little break. We were responding to a question from Rebel Scum without naming Rebel Scum. You can leave questions on Facebook. You can leave them at the Reason comments thing. His question was, Donald supports right to try. And this is FDA stuff. This is not criminal justice stuff. Sounds good. He also talked about rehabilitating prisoners, which is not a note that I recall hearing from Donald Trump in the past.
He was rehabilitating them, but then he was also like, let's be clear, we're going to make a lot more of them.
True, including with combating the opioid crisis. From what I can gather, this was, we're going to get tough on the pushers and the dealers.
Yeah. So the war on drugs is ongoing, but the war on people who were victims of the war on drugs has maybe been drawn back a little bit, which I guess I'll take it. There was some talk about whether there was going to be a significant criminal justice element to this speech, and there was some kind of back and forth on that. I think I find it difficult to credit the idea that Donald Trump will be the agent of significant criminal justice reform, whereas I find it very easy to credit the idea that he could be the agent of deregulation of our drugs, via right to try and other FDA improvements.
Those types of drugs. Peter, when it was years ago, it was lifetimes ago, but it was actually on Monday when we had a podcast with three of us and also Nick Gillespie.
I've gone gray since then.
You have the salt and pepper beard. Looks like you're ready for a made-for-TV
I'm
show
drinking
about
Rip Van
doctors.
Winkle. It's named after me.
Your terrible idea for what State of the Union addresses should be from now on was extended white papers. So since you had mentioned, and not everyone saw this before, but that the mean kind of policy chunk of this was his immigration heave, grade his policy white paper in the middle of this State of the Union address on that. What stuck out at you as being notable in the way he talked about and the deal points of what he expects there to be in a DACA deal?
Look, Trump basically outlined the Stephen Miller deal that we heard about last week. There wasn't a whole lot of daylight between what Trump said tonight and the deal that was announced, rolled out kind of initially at the end of last week that we knew was coming here. The deal that, by all reports, has been at least heavily led by, if not basically entirely written by Stephen Miller, a kind of chief Trump speechwriter type, who is also his lead on immigration. And the deal is we will create a pathway to citizenship for 1.8 million, I believe it is, immigrants who are not here legally. In exchange, the other side of that deal is we're going to boost border wall funding by something like $25 billion, and we are going to reduce overall levels of immigration by focusing it on skills-based immigration. And so, I mean, in some ways, this was Trump's rollout of that idea to the nation, because the rollout last week was really just to the press, to Congress, to kind of Washington insiders who have been waiting for what Trump is going to say about this. And as far as that goes, I mean, in a lot of ways, it was, how about this? It could have been worse. It could have been a lot worse. It wasn't good. I don't think anybody at this table is thinking, man, that was a great deal. Let's take it.
Well, let's talk about...
But it could have been so much worse. And maybe that's like the whole sort of my whole take on this speech is it could have been a lot worse.
Well, let's talk about how it was bad, however. Catherine, you've been paying attention to claims based on so-called chain migration, which is family reunification migration. One of, I think a direct quote from Trump tonight was, chain migration allows people to send in an unlimited number of distant relatives.
Yeah.
So how true is that?
The
on
chain
a scale
migration,
of 1 to totally true.
It's 17 Pinocchios. So this is the thing, right? Chain migration is the bugaboo right now, and it's a code word that covers the fact that Republicans really changed their mind on immigration. They used to say, if you stand in line, if you do the right things, if you're part of the legal immigration system, which my ancestors were, it's amazing how every single Republican in Congress, their family came here legally, like 100%, then it's fine. But we got to do something about these illegals. And this pushback against chain migration, those are legal migrants. Those are people who came here under the terms of our laws, and they now say, actually, we want to reduce that number. We want to take that away from people. And I found the phrasing of this actually particularly troubling. He said he wants to protect the nuclear family by ending chain migration. And then he clarifies, okay, under the current system, you can bring distant relatives, which is not true. You can bring
your mom
1 degree removed from your children and spouse. And then he says, under our plan, we will focus on the immediate family by limiting sponsorships to spouses and minor children.
That doesn't include mom and dad.
Which, first of all, doesn't include mom and dad, which is a central part of the nuclear family. Second of all, doesn't include adult children. Again, nuclear families are arguably, at least before those adult children reproduce, still consist of adult children. And you know, these are not people with bad outcomes. Like there's this weird pretense that of the 2/3 of the people are spouses and minor children. The other third are aunties, uncles, siblings, whatever. These are people who have good outcomes when they come here. They come, they join their family, they get jobs, they become Americans, they plan to stay. So it's totally weird to me that we're like suddenly deciding that these people are the bad guys.
But this is the debate in some ways in the Trump era isn't really about outcomes anymore. I mean, kind of nominally it is, sort of on the surface we talk about, oh, we want skills-based immigration for people who will come here and actually add to the economy. And this was something that Trump said tonight was, oh, sure, we want people who have skills, who want to work, who care about America, who respect the idea of America. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but I mean, it's really sort of a kind of offensive quote in that it implied that most of the people who have in many cases risked their lives, their livelihoods, their families' livelihoods to make it here. Yes, in some cases illegally, but who have taken extraordinary steps to come here and work and add to the economy. People who are not eligible for benefits, people who have basically said, this is where I want to work, often a very low-paying, difficult job. This is where I want to come and add to the economy. Trump was basically saying, those people, they're basically worthless. They don't add anything. And so, I mean, that was, I think, maybe the worst part of the speech to me was this implication that immigrants who come here under today's system they're not really part of America or part of American society or contributors to the American economy. But what I was saying was that this all goes back to where the debate has gone recently, which is not about what kinds of immigrants we should let in, but simply about how many. And whether we should be allowing more or roughly the same amount, or as the Stephen Millers and a sort of restrictionist factions of the world want, whether we should be cutting the numbers of immigrants in the medium to long term. And I think that all of the kind of rhetoric about skills and about only the right type and all of this, the deal is designed to create a system that in the long term lowers the number of immigrants. And I think that's really the sort of the worrying part for both kind of the American polity and for the future of the country, but also for the economy and all those, sort of other measurable outcomes.
It strikes me that the discussion, the atmospherics around the discussion, this was true in the speech, definitely true all throughout Trump's campaign, beginning from his first escalating down into our lives, true in the first white paper of the campaign, which is about immigration, Stephen Miller stuff and all this. It's bathed in talks about MS-13. Yeah. It's talking about we need merit-based, and the kind of the assumption of merit-based is that the people who aren't merit-based, they ain't got the merit, right? It's an atmosphere.
Deep thoughts from Matt Welch.
Thank you. Like this is what happens late at night. It's an assumption that these people don't have the skills that we need, that they aren't contributing, they're more dangerous, they're more likely to blow us up. And as we do not tire of pointing out, at reason, basically none of that is true, or almost none of that is true. You have to dig, you have to twist things to make any bit of that particularly true, and yet that you always hear things like that, or they're a drain on the welfare state instead of a net contributor and all that. So today I was doing what I like to do around the State of the Union address, which is to go to UC Santa Barbara's Presidency Archive. And
do you have a sponsorship deal with them?
I sure do.
Because
yeah.
Matt really does write this post every year. Like, go back and look.
And it's always good though, so you should read all of them.
State of the Union Spelunking by Matt Welch.
It's too much fun, and I like to find good comps for the this year's State of the Union. So
you're like a State of the Union real estate broker.
I'm thinking more kind of like, comparing baseball players across eras. I want to see what kind of platoon advantage you have in home games in the Baker Bowl. So anyways, I was looking for people who were in their 1-year anniversary giving their State of the Union address. And I was struck in all of this to find the second best Warren G in history, which is Warren G. Harding. I think there's only two, and he's definitely number 2. His 1922 State of the Union address is filled with talk, and this was for him a precursor to the 1924 Immigration Act, which changed the shape of immigration in this country in a very strong way, in which Stephen Miller and Coulter, presumably Donald Trump, think that that was the good act. It severely limited immigration from places that were back then considered skeevy, which is mostly Europe, Southern Europe, and and Eastern Europe and whatnot. But his atmospherics in that speech was talking about, we've seen this recrudescence of hyphenated Americanism, and we thought we had stamped that out.
Hyphenation is evil.
Hyphenation, terrible.
That's right, Mangu-Ward.
Yeah, no kidding. Hyphenation, terrible, but also questioning their loyalty, and it's saying that they're sort of in original sin because they came here illegally, even though back then they kind of didn't, for the most part, come here illegally. But it's bathed in the same kind of sense of that of unreality. He's describing things that aren't true, but that are based on kind of a contemptuous fear of the other. And it's striking that 195 years later, whatever the hell it is, that's 96. That's credible.
Okay, that's good.
That we're kind of hitting the same notes after all. Good things. Can we say anything good about this before we go to more questions?
Did somebody ask us for good things for more questions? I think somebody did. Krusty Juggler Double Dog dares us to say something nice about Trump.
Okay, Catherine, you start.
I already said the nice thing about Right to Try. That was good. I did like the little nod to people paying their debt to society and getting to come back into the world. I like the deregulation stuff. You can actually, Peter will vouch for the fact that when he said, I've deregulated more than any other president ever has, and I'm only at the beginning of my first year, I gave a little lonely clap because that's really good. So thanks for the deregulation, buddy.
I was clapping in my heart.
Peter,
using my heart valve.
Krusty Juggler is Double Dog daring you to say something nice.
You just did.
So, I mean, one nice thing that I could say that I already did was this speech could have been much worse. That's
a Katherine Mangu-Ward compliment, right there.
Really, I mean, that's how we talk to writers here, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're all beautiful, wonderful writers who help. And just as Trump's, I actually thought the defense of tax reform was much better than I expected and
actually,
much more extended. Really and this was sort of the policy opener, right? This was the first act, the kind of the 5% to 10% of the speech. And wow, we've got somebody is coming after us here.
Pence is going home.
Pence is going home.
It's actually just that Mike Pence is coming home. And so the defense of tax reform, if you decouple it from the kind of crappy, only I can make the economy better, and I did part, which I think Catherine has had a few things to say about already.
I'd love to talk about that.
Decouple it from that. I mean, he went through tax reform and made the case for a number of its specific provisions in a way that I have never seen Trump make an extended case for an economic policy before. Now, this is really a low bar in a lot of ways. On the other hand, he did it, and he did it in a way that was roughly accurate and competent.
He read it good off the teleprompter.
He did.
Good.
He allowed one of his advisors to write a roughly accurate, reasonably competent explanation/defense of the imperfect but with some good parts tax bill that they passed last month, and he read it. And he read it without embellishing or
he
getting
added
it
the
wrong.
word beautiful.
He did. Probably he did.
There was a lot of beautiful. Can we talk about the taking credit for all the economics things that is good forever
Apparently
and ever?
we can.
Amen?
We can.
Yeah, we totally can. So this is a Trump jam. This is an every president jam, right? You take office, something good happens. You're like, oh, that was definitely me. Taking credit for substantial economic indicators in your first year in office is, I think, almost always bullshit. In this particular case, Trump has been warming up on this message of taking credit for low Black unemployment, which I guess silver lining here is like the fact that Trump is thinking about whether he could do something good for Black people is good. But Donald Trump does not deserve any credit for low Black unemployment any more than he deserves credit for the other thing he was taking credit for. So many credits in that sentence this month, which was the lack of airline accidents. I don't know if you guys caught that one, but there were no accidents on American run commercial airliners in the last year.
I think what people forget is that Trump personally flew
heavier than air flight is a power that Trump has.
Personally flew
floating.
something like 94% of all airline.
He did do that. It was awesome.
No, right.
But that claim is no more or less ridiculous than the black unemployment claim. It's a number that's been declining for about a decade. It's been declining for about a decade because of broader economic forces and also because of broader social forces that are awesome. We did that. He didn't do that.
Let's go to another question. This also allows me to answer the previous one. Casey Crow asks, I wonder if the poor Korean dude would have the skills necessary to be admitted into the U.S. It's a snarky question, but there's something to that. That was, for me, one of my favorite moments of the speech. Well, it wasn't even part of the speech. It was just this guy who had overcome incredible adversity was psyched up to be there. And he was doing this with his crutches for a long time. And that's the one time that I clapped. And then you think about, and I hate to be this guy, but not really.
You love to be this guy.
I half like to be this guy. We are taking fewer refugees in America this coming fiscal year, than we have in all but 3 or 4 years over the last 40, at a time when the worldwide refugee population is at its peak. And this is a deliberate, conscious choice by Donald Trump, Steve Miller, and other people and his advisors, because we don't know where these people came from, and they should, fix their own problems back at home. And these are pretty much direct quotes. So at a time, we have a history of welcoming refugees who've been from actual honest-to-God shitholes out there, tyrannical, awful places. We have always led the world, if not in personally resettling from each country, which wouldn't be appropriate, but certainly kind of organizing the thought process behind that. We're not doing that anymore. So even the best part of the speech is a part that I didn't particularly love. Let's go to another one from Sarah Skywalker. What do you think about the Guantanamo comment? And Catherine, I'll sort of open that up further, broad kind of war on terror, foreign policy stuff that you heard from Mr. Trump.
Yeah, I guess the Guantanamo comment seemed to me to be, in some ways, the most pointed partisan part of the speech. He was like, remember that guy before me who was going to close Guantanamo and let the terrorists run free in our midst? I'm totes not that guy. Or Hillary Clinton, by the way, at the end. Like, I read that as... as I want to do with many of things in State of the Union speeches, but especially this, I read that much more as a kind of rah-rah signaling thing than as a policy nitty-gritty point.
Peter?
There was a lot of rah-rah signaling. I mean, on the other hand, it's a State of the Union by Donald Trump.
Isn't it weird? And I might be... making the audience hate me even more than they already do. But isn't it weird
not possible
that Camille's not here to make the comparison even more profound. But he talked about, we basically took all of ISIS's territory, right? That should be a traditional kind of like, we just did a thing that a whole lot of people here like and have wanted for a long time, that criticized Obama for, and that even former Obama holdovers were contemptuous of Trump's plan. He doesn't have a plan and this kind of stuff, and yet like this administration doesn't know how to brag about it. He didn't even know how to pull off that line. It wasn't a big moment in the speech, and it's like, wasn't that a big deal? Wasn't that like on the thing that everyone was talking about after a guy got his head cut off? Peter.
So to go back to sort of my earlier argument that this was a not super Trumpian speech, I think one way of understanding that is that Trump himself was an empty vehicle for this speech. This did not feel like a speech. So everybody in America now, sadly, depressingly, is well aware of Donald Trump's Twitter feed. We're all like, you can't escape it. If you're a journalist, you really can't escape it. It's like it has been tattooed into your DNA at like a molecular atomic level, and it's just like you as you're dreaming at night, like the Trump's tweets are being fed into your dreams, right? And other Americans are just like, yeah, I know all about Trump's Twitter feed, even if they don't have a Twitter account, even if they don't, right? Trump's Twitter feed is not entirely written by Donald Trump, but it is a pretty representative sample of who Donald Trump, the actual individual human, is and how he thinks. And we are in this weird situation where the president of the United States is in many ways not really the best representative of the White House, the executive branch, the administration. And we saw that tonight in the way that this didn't feel like a super Trumpian kind of Trump Twitter feed-esque speech. And I think that that's really sort of weird and notable, is that Trump himself probably does not fully understand or is not, I think, obviously capable of just making all of the arguments and explanations that were found in his speech on his own, off the cuff. He is capable of reading them with some practice slowly. You notice he talked very slowly throughout the night. He was coached to do it. And the speech ran really long.
We didn't coach.
Right?
We didn't coach Peter.
I was not
to do
coaching
that.
on that.
That
Right?
was
But
just
like
not coaching.
And so there is this weird disconnect that I think was kind of implicitly evident in the speech between Trump the individual, who we can best understand through his interviews, through his Twitter feed and through his campaign, right? And remember all those crazy speeches he gave during his campaign where he would be like, Trump steaks, which haven't existed for 10 years, and like spend an hour of live cable television bragging about them. And this sort of thing, which really feels like a product of the administrative apparatus, the Stephen Millers, the policy advisors, the people he is surrounded by. And Trump, in the end, when it came to a major event and came to sort of declarations of the administration's policy, did not take the presidential prerogative to go in and say, well, this is what I want, this is what I believe, because he doesn't want or believe anything particular about those things. So the rest of the executive branch got to kind of be in the spotlight tonight through the vessel of Trump.
This is a weird place for libertarians to be, to say the best Trump is the ultra-conventional Republican Trump.
It's not a great Trump.
It's the best
but
Trump.
It's better. Yes, it is.
I think it's the best Trump.
It may be the best. It's certainly better than Trump's Twitter feed.
I don't know if I can't adjudicate that. I mean, on one hand, you have a lot of people who like the idea that he's the bull in the china shop, discrediting these discreditable institutions, and we want to see more of that.
Are you doing the token Nick Gillespie right now?
I'm just as a stand-in for the Nick Gillespies, and
yeah,
you know,
I mean, okay, there is a
we
case
should
for
have
like
hung a leather jacket on the wall behind us, just
like
in
what
reverence.
if Donald Trump had showed up for the State of the Union and just like burned everything down? Like, what if he had just been like, I brought all Bill Clinton's girlfriends, and I'm just going to tell you about Trump steaks, and
I'm firing
Bob Mueller live in front of Congress.
That would have been a hell of a lead.
And there's something,
Bob Mueller, you're fired.
I get that
now,
impulse,
ladies and gentlemen of Congress.
Peter Suderman's fired.
Peter Suderman's fired. I could do that now.
Continue.
The temptation to kind of encourage that aspect in him, I understand, and I particularly understand in libertarians. But I think this speech was a good example of like, okay, Trump pretending to be a normal Republican still puts in the stuff that normal Republicans have always done, which is that little bit of libertarianism that keeps our hearts in a constant state of limbo.
Speak for yourself. One thing that wasn't in that speech that was in every State of the Union speech from 1997 to 2013, as obviously I know.
Wait, where did you learn about that? In the archive of who?
That's the Presidency Project at UC Santa Barbara.
Oh.
Beautiful campus. Was a reference to the long-term unsustainability of our entitlement state. It's been in every single one. 17 consecutive years it was in. 2013 was the last one that it was not in. Not in at all here. And there's a Republican, mind you, talking about it. Meanwhile, we heard about spending enough on infrastructure that it's going to unlock 1.5 trillion. We need to bust through the caps on the defense sequester. What did you
Dangerous defense sequester. The gleaming roads we're going to build.
What does your fiscal conservative heart tell you about what you heard tonight, Catherine?
My fiscal conservative heart has been broken so many times that I no longer am able to feel anything.
Okay. Suderman, was there any
I
sense
mean,
of
like your fiscal conservative heart's dating profile on Tinder is just like despair.
Yeah.
There's
why do you
no
know
other
about
words.
that?
I don't even.
I don't know where this
I
went.
don't even
No,
know
of
how
course,
that works.
It was always sort of a bunch of hooey, whatever, Republicans, or, I mean, Obama did this too. He always had that one line in his speech that was like, maybe things aren't going so great with our entitlements. We should solve that problem. But it's like, it was always the bottom thing on everybody's to-do list. And now it's fallen off the bottom of the to-do list, which is what happens to that thing.
Right. So Trump is literalizing and making explicit the implicit Republican policy that has been in place at least since the second Bush term. And that is that entitlements, who gives a shit? And that, I mean, Mitt Romney in 2012, after Obamacare had passed, but before it went into effect, ran his most frequent and most prominent criticism of Obamacare was that it cut Medicare. Obamacare was paid for in half by cuts to Medicare. Now, there were some arguments, reasonable at the time, about whether those cuts were real or sustainable. Some of them were, some of them weren't. It's somewhat complicated. But Obama also was like pretty forthright that like the big problem is Medicare and to a lesser extent Medicaid and Social Security. It's Medicare, right? And like Obama was like, we should probably find some extremely technocratic and like think tank approved white papery way of fixing this. And I was kind of on board with that, except for the fact that it would never work and it would never happen. But like trying to fix the problem. And I mean, even George Bush, right? Like tried to do something about Social Security. But like, what was his big addition to the entitlement world was Medicare Part D, an expansion of Medicare. And you can make the argument, I guess, if you want, that it's the least bad part of Medicare. It's the only part that came in under its cost projections, all that, right? But like, go back the last 20 years or so since the end of the Clinton era, definitely since George Bush's failed Social Security reform. And it is very difficult to find meaningful, substantive action from Republicans on big entitlements. Except, I mean, like the only place where they sort of tried to do anything was Obamacare. And we saw how that worked when they had the White House, the Senate, and the House this year, and we're trying to repeal it and replace it with something else. That didn't work.
Peter, they got rid of the individual mandate today, as Donald Trump reminded us.
Yes.
We've got like, what, 2 minutes left? 5 minutes left?
Let's do it.
2
Lightning
minutes
round.
lightning round
Take
here.
the questions.
Okay. Joseph Smith asks, will this current conservative movement end what Trump has done? It's not English, Joseph. We'll say end when Trump is done. I'll just edit that for you. Or will there be enough inertia to keep it going, Katherine Mangu-Ward?
Once Trump is gone, everything starts over again. It probably still won't be libertarian, but it'll be different.
Okay. Peter, any thoughts to add on
What
that?
conservative movement?
Ooh.
Very good. Sarah Skywalker, if that's her real name,
name,
asks, do you think using the stick is the right way to go for North Korea? I will answer this definitively. I don't fucking know, nor does anybody else. However, I do know this, Sarah Skywalker, if, again, that is your real name, is that the president said, for years we tried complacency, and what we saw there is that it led to aggression and provocation. What have we seen this year? Where we changed the complacency thing, I feel like we've got a little bit of provocation, maybe even a little bit more here. So it's too soon to say. We don't know. Scares the hell out of me. Any other thoughts from people?
North Korea, bad. Also nuclear war, bad.
Catherine Brandon Joldosh, which is his real name,
Yes.
asks, what is your position on prison reform? What's the appropriate way to improve the operation and purpose of the prison system, to blend profit goals with locking up something or other, private prison, slippery slope?
So I think that actually the line about prison reform in here was pretty weird because it implied that something that we were doing while people were in prison was what needed to be reformed in order to let them rejoin society. It seems clear to me that the type of reform that's far more needed is sentencing reform, which is a different thing. Prisons could be better, prisons should be better, but we should put fewer people in them, and that would make them most better of all.
They did it in Texas and it worked.
We have Tel Conter the Wanderer, again, real name. What are we as individuals who think for ourselves supposed to think about this?
Should we all say it together? We are individuals.
That's exactly that. Is
You do you, Zay.
I don't even know what that means. Joseph Smith asks a good question. Do you think Trump will loosen his stance on trade? The washing machine tariff was not a good move.
No,
Catherine.
it's going to get so much worse. This is what Trump lives for. He wants to get in the mix and have a bunch of fights about very specific, stupid trade policies. We are going to be trading solar panels for washing machines, for chicken feet, for car tires, for minivans. It's going to be a disaster. This is going to be the worst part of the Trump administration looking back. The way in which the U.S. entangled and complicated and generally ratcheted up the rage in all debates about trade everywhere and always.
Trump views everything as a real estate deal, and real estate deals are heavily about the fixins that you put on the buildings, whether it's marble or granite or
countertops.
A bunch of, right? And so he focuses very, very much on those little specific provisions, and washing machines are the marble tile of the stupid hallway of the trade deal that is America.
It didn't make any sense.
No, it did not. I would just point out that the phrase that the administration is using and the president used a variation on it tonight is free and fair and reciprocal trade. Your assignment tonight is go home, think about how that phrase doesn't make sense. Just
Also,
think about it. Think about it really hard.
It
doesn't make sense.
Think about how John Rawls has won. Because when Donald Trump is basically defining justice as fairness, we've lost and John Rawls has won.
Before we leave, we have to go to Krusty Juggler, who probably got the most questions in here. On a scale of Anthony Hopkins to Peter O'Toole, how intoxicated do you have to be to actually pay attention to this drivel? Peter, I think maybe you should answer the question.
I'm going to go with Ed Norton.
Gerard Depardieu.
Serge Gainsbourg. It's French people all the way down. And should we? Is there another good one here? Yeah, Boris Tien 405. Shout out to one of the worst freeways in America. Anybody notice that basically everything that was good and agreeable amongst both sides? I didn't see the other side. We were busy we were making art here amongst both sides. Was libertarian. He capitalized the L too. Oh, this is a bad system.
What
here.
things were agreeable?
Not sure. Republicans tend the deregulatory stuff,
reform,
the tax stuff,
the prison
and
stuff. I don't think the tax stuff was
FDA
super
stuff.
agreeable.
I think people like to let people dying of cancer try drugs.
I'm not sure they do, given history.
Sure, they do. Please.
No, I mean I do. You do.
Okay.
We do.
The answer to your
that's
question,
the thing people like.
Boris Jen 405, is that's always the case, isn't it? Is it not? The best things tend to be libertarian. If
bringing people together.
If there was a Democrat talking about ending the war on weed, we would say, hey, check out the best thing having that speech was the Libertarian Party. But Democrats don't actually ever do that. Are we wrapping this thing up? Technical people nodding vigorously. Okay. Thank you all for watching and suffering through whatever technical hiccups we might have had, but I don't really acknowledge that they existed. I was and will remain Matt Welch, along with Katherine Mangu-Ward, Peter Suderman, and Peter Suderman's Hooch. Stay tuned for the next time we do this, which will be in at least 6, but probably 12 months. Goodbye.
One hopes.